Natural medicine is helping people support their immune system. And the more we know about natural medicine and how to use it, the more we will be equipped to face everything that's unfolding faster and faster.
I think we need to have a different respiratory etiquette, and that's public health. And that's where we're going to save lives, because we're going to have new protocols on public health, and people are going to be more courteous, and they're not going to infect others.
Hi, and welcome back to Proven, Healing Breakthroughs Backed by Science. I'm Nick Palizzi, and we're so excited to bring you this special hidden episode 10 tonight. Given the current pandemic, a lot of us are looking for safe and effective ways to boost our immune system, de-stress our bodies, and thrive in this new reality. There's a ton of information out there, but unfortunately, a lot of it isn't based on good, solid science. And oddly enough, the major news networks and publications are saying nothing about how to stack the odds in your favor using alternative lifestyle approaches and natural medicines. So in episode 10, we're going to be speaking with a group of experts who specialize in immune health and hidden infections. Our goal with this episode is to give you some well-vetted strategies to protect yourself and your families during these unprecedented times. Are you ready for one more final proven journey? Let's go. The first modality we'll be exploring tonight is an innovation in electromedicine that has been approved by the FDA for the treatment of non-union fractures, or bone breaks that are not healing despite all surgical efforts. But it's also a remarkable tool to boost your immune system and heal infections. As you're about to see, viral and bacterial infections begin on an energetic or electrical level, and then they become physical. PEMF, or pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, works on this first level to stop those illnesses before they begin.
You could and should you be using magnetic field therapy with almost anything because of the healing benefits that you're going to get from the magnetic fields. If I give somebody an antibiotic, well, what does the antibiotic do? All it does is helps the body to kill the bugs. You're giving the body a fighting chance, is what you're doing. What heals the infection? You. Your body heals it. So do the doctors finish the job? No. When you leave that office with your antibiotic prescription, the doctor crosses his or her fingers. You're hoping this person will heal on their own. You're relying on it. And fortunately, a good part of the time, it's going to work. But you can shorten the trial. You can shorten the period of time for the infection. If you have a kidney infection, or if you have pneumonia, or if you have meningitis, do you want to leave that to chance? I wouldn't think so. You want, because if you leave it to chance, you're letting the body heal itself. The body may not be strong enough or good enough to heal it itself. So you're doing nothing to help support the body to heal itself. And most doctors will not even give you supplements and other things to help your body to be stronger and more vital to be able to do that job. Well, PEMFs will do that. Right? They'll just go right through the tissues. They'll help to decrease the inflammation. They help to repair the damage that's caused by the infection. So you're less likely to get scarring in the lung from the infection. We should not be treating people with antibiotics alone for pneumonias or kidney infections. So we should be using magnetic fields. Magnetic fields don't leave things to chance. The research is pretty clear. What you're doing with magnetic fields is to augment the body's capacity to fight the infection. They increase things called macrophages, which are the natural scavengers in our bodies that fight bacteria, viruses, fungi, and go find heavy metals and other toxins and get rid of them. Well, magnetic field therapy has been found to actually increase the scavenging ability of these molecules in our bodies. So they help the infection by augmenting the body's ability to fight these infections. Let's use the example of the cold. We have basically an energetic level, so you feel the cold coming. You feel off. We have a physiologic level. Then you got a sore throat, you got a runny nose, you got a sneezing, you may have a bit of a temperature. The body is reacting to the invasion. If it keeps going into the body, it goes into a pathophysiologic level. You still have the physiologic response, but now you have dead tissue. And that's when the mucus starts. The mucus starts to turn color, yellows, browns, greens, whatever. Now you got dying cells. That's the pathophysiologic level. If it continues to go into the body, goes deeper and deeper, then you get pathology. You have enough dead tissue that it's significant. That's where you get ear infections. That's where you get sinus infections. That's where you get bronchitis. That's where you get pneumonia. Now you got pathology going on. So if you start therapy at the first level, the energetic level, you knock it out within hours. It's gone, right? Because then you supply the body with the energy it needs. One of the things that PEMFs do is increase ATP between 100 to 600%. So if you're treating this whole area with magnetic field therapy, you're already beginning to make the cells energized to be able to deal with the problem faster. And that's what the body does. Whenever you have an infection, the ATP level in the area of the infection rises dramatically. And so with magnetic field therapy, you're augmenting it. So if you're deficient or depleted already in producing ATP, magnetic field therapy is going to augment that. Magnetic fields don't heal you. The body heals you. Magnetic fields give the body the opportunity to heal itself by increasing the charge in the tissues. That's what heals. So it's a completely natural approach.
Before we get to proven modality number 4, we have a special report from Dr. Frank Littman, who joined us remotely from New York City to discuss some powerful preventative measures for the current pandemic. This is a perspective that we're not being told about by the authorities and major news media. Dr. Littman is a brilliant human being, and the wisdom he shares is something that every one of us needs to hear.
Why do you think it is that preventative measures that we could be taking as a society are not really being championed outside of the few basic things like washing your hands, wearing a mask? There isn't a lot of talk on the major news outlets about the other preventative measures we can take from a more lifestyle perspective.
You know, the way I see this pandemic is there are a couple of different issues. There's the pandemic of the virus, there's the pandemic of the fear around the virus, and then there's an underlying pandemic of poor metabolic health in the society here, where we have carbohydrate intolerance, metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, diabetes, heart disease, basically sugar dysregulation. So we got this pandemic of poor metabolic health, which predisposes people with the virus to have poor outcomes. And then this is all on top of this climate change, the destruction of natural habitats, factory farming. So, you know, in a way, we sort of sitting ducks for this to happen. You know, I believe if there wasn't this underlying pandemic of metabolic poor health, if there wasn't climate change and destruction of natural habitats, we wouldn't be in such a bad position. So this is really a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for us to be aware of the importance of what we eat, the importance of nutritional deficiencies, the importance of climate change. So we need to be kind to ourselves after this, to the people around us, and to the earth. I think if this is not a wake-up call to take climate change seriously, then I don't know what is.
Can we talk about heart health and how heart health and susceptibility to COVID could be related on a sort of a deeper level?
We're not sure exactly what the mechanisms are, but you know, the way I see it I see it globally. You know, what the studies have shown and what the observations have been is in all countries, in particular in America and in the UK, where metabolic health is so bad and there's so much diabetes and heart disease and obesity, the outcomes have been really poor. Actually, most of the poor outcomes have been in people with diabetes, hypertension, or what I call poor metabolic health. Why that is happening, well, I would, you know, the exact mechanism I'm not sure of, but what I would say is sugar dysregulation, which is what we're talking about downstream. So the downstream mechanism is sugar dysregulation, which will then lead to heart disease, obesity, diabetes, all sorts of inflammatory problems. That sugar dysregulation predisposes one to more inflammatory problems, which then predisposes one to poor outcomes from COVID-19, because you're going to get immune dysregulation and then these cytokine storms, these inflammatory particles getting released. So It's not necessarily about boosting the immune system. It's about having a well-regulated immune system. And you won't have a well-regulated immune system. That means it doesn't underperform or overperform, because a cytokine storm is too much of an immune system reaction. And you won't have a well-regulated immune system if you have sugar dysregulation downstream. So one of the major issues, I think, downstream is this sugar dysregulation, which is then causing all these other problems. So what they're calling these comorbidities of obesity and heart disease and diabetes, it's all the same problem downstream, which is a sugar dysregulation, leads to immune dysregulation, leads to poor outcomes from when anyone gets COVID-19.
We were talking to Dr. Hyman, and we were talking about the fact that a lot of people who have metabolic disorders have no idea they have them. They don't have any idea that that's going on. He was saying some people oftentimes are fat on the inside. They're not on the outside. They're like, oh, I can eat whatever I want to. I look great. I feel great, and they don't realize that, you're not really getting away with it. You might have a way, you might be hiding it better than other people, but you actually have other disorders developing that you don't even know about. Can we talk about that?
So, when I say the problem downstream is sugar dysregulation, this can start even as in childhood, in teenage years, in young adulthood. It often takes years and years to present as health problems. So many people, in fact, a study showed that it's only 1 in 8 people in America are metabolically healthy. So a lot of people are walking around with sugar dysregulation or poor metabolic health and don't even know they have it, because they may not be overweight, their blood pressure may be normal or high normal, they don't have diabetes yet. So this is you've got to see this as this there's this gradation between black and white, or there's this huge gradation between health and disease, and we all fit somewhere in the middle, in this gray area between this black and white. And as soon as you start tilting over in the gray area to that disease area, the poorer your immune response is going to be. So yes, most of us are somewhere in that gray area. Very few people are perfectly healthy, but I suppose there's a tipping point. Where that tipping point is, we don't know. But what we probably do know is when we get hit by this viral onslaught, we have the right immune response to cope with it?
How can we as individuals find out how we're doing? Especially in a situation right now, most people are afraid to go to their doctor or to be touched by anybody or to be in an office or to leave their home. So how do you even know if you have it? I mean, some people have obvious signs. Others, like we just said, don't. How are there easy tests that you can do? Can you do your own labs? Can you do your other tests that you can do that kind of indicate where you are on the spectrum?
So this is a great question, because even with all the tests that we do, we're only picking it up at a later stage. The good news is this is reversible in a month or 2 or 3. So the good news is if you change your diet, if you start sleeping properly, if you move your body, if you deal with the stress, you can reverse a lot of these metabolic changes. So ultimately, you don't really have to test yourself to know that you got a problem. My attitude is assume you got poor metabolic health and start doing or making the changes that will correct that, because it actually, interestingly enough, corrects very quickly. When I say very quickly, I mean it will take years and years to build up, but it'll take weeks and months to reverse itself. And I see it all the time. It actually happened to me. I found out I was pre-diabetic. I've never been overweight. Maybe I had a little bit of fat around my stomach. My blood pressure was always sort of borderline. And, I did my bloods and I had a high hemoglobin A1C, and my diet was relatively healthy, but I was eating a lot of fruit and a lot of grains because I thought that was healthy. And I stopped that. I went paleo. I stopped eating fruit for the most part, no grains, and I reversed everything. So, and it happens quite quickly. So my advice is to most of us, almost all of us, should be on a low carbohydrate diet. It doesn't mean You need to eat meat if you don't want to eat meat. I get it. But you need to be on a low carbohydrate diet. You need to take sleep seriously. You need to exercise or move your body every day or as much as you can throughout the day. And you got to acknowledge that stress is an issue for a lot of people, and do something. And then it could be exercise could help. I'm a huge fan of meditation. I find that incredibly helpful. You can dance around your living room. You can do yoga. There are many ways you can deal with stress. You can do some breathing techniques. So there are many things you can do. And probably most important, which we don't really take seriously enough, are those little things that we do on a daily basis. What I always say is the ordinary things that we do on a daily basis have extraordinary healing effects. So being kind to yourself, being kind to others, being kind to the earth, which I think is important, having gratitude, making sure that you're part of a community or a family so that you're connecting to others is really important for your health. So all these little things, I think, add up to a healthy lifestyle, which will over time, over weeks and months, then reverse this poor metabolic health that probably most of us have at some stage.
Up next is a revolutionary technology from Germany that enables us to measure inflammation in real time so that we can better understand where problem areas or potential diseases are brewing in our body before they get out of control. When it comes to helping our immune system to better do its job, regulation thermography is an invaluable tool, as you're about to find out.
No one disorder, whether it's heart disease, colitis, Crohn's disease, no disease is based upon only a single organ. There is almost always an infection somewhere in most diseases that the body is reacting to. Many problems are related to multiple systems going wrong. In regulation thermometry with the alpha system, we can see the input from multiple systems. We take the skin temperature of about 120 points on the body. It takes about 5 minutes to do that first test, but then we follow it with a stress of just subjecting the patient to cool air of a room, a normal room temperature, and then we take a second measurement, and then we compare the first and the second. And what we find is in diseases of specific organs, we can see that by the changes not cooling in the right direction, but staying the same or even getting warmer. And if it gets warmer, that's inflammation. So we're able to see inflammation in degrees that are much finer than the ability of blood tests to show inflammation. And now we know in the current theories of disease, most diseases are caused from chronic inflammation. So what it does is it opens up a window to physiological health. We can see the abnormalities of the liver. We can see abnormalities of the pancreas. We can look at the lungs. We can see the cardiac interface because all of the autonomic nerves that are conveying the information to the skin and controlling the capillary beds have their inputs and feed from the organs in their region. We see infections in the teeth, in the jaw, in the lymph that are creating problems lower down. You look at the data with alpha thermometry, there's a pattern that exists when these 2 points are a very different temperature. So this one will be 1 degree hotter than this one. Every time that's happened, we send them for viral panels and they come out with cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus. We look at the lymph and then we give them lymphatic remedies. The lymphatic system is the most forgotten system of medicine. Mostly doctors don't think anything when they feel your lymph here and feel engorged glands that show that you have an active virus or have had a bacterial infection, and they'll ignore it. And then they'll say, well, I'm looking at your blood test, your white cell count is fine, your red cell count is fine. So there's a lot of flaws in conventional medicine because of the constraints of money and insurance and time. My patients all come to me. Why? Because they don't get any answers from their conventional doctors and they feel better with what we do. I have people that have chronic bladder infections, they're gone. They had them, they would just take antibiotics. As soon as they stop the antibiotic, then it returns. The whole thing comes down to, with regulation thermometry, trying to bridge the way to make doctors understand that it's a very important thing that's been missed in medicine is the functional physiology aspect that happens as a person is becoming sick. And we need to look at the body systemically. And in one single test, 20-minute test, that's why I love the alpha thermometry. We're also developing a handheld model that'll be a smartphone model with a simple sensor, and you can carry this around. We can go and treat poor people with humanitarian efforts to upgrade the education in maintaining their health, and you can build an entire country that way.
Up next is a special report with Dr. Anita Wong, who's on the front lines of the COVID pandemic as we speak. Dr. Wong is an emergency physician in California who is treating COVID patients every single day. She also helped to establish the first emergency clinic in Beijing during the SARS virus outbreak in 2002. When it comes to good sources of information about COVID-19, there are very few people I know who are more bulletproof than Dr. Wong. Here's a snippet from our recent conversation that we found to be extremely relevant to the times we're now in.
Okay, so just to start off with like a 10,000 foot view sort of question, you are in a unique position. Most of us don't have experience with the emergency medicine component of what's going on right now. And I just wanted to start with your thoughts on, I guess, from the ground, where we are with this and what your outlook is with the current pandemic.
Well, with the current pandemic, I am a little bit surprised that there are few people who don't believe that this is a true pandemic. Or I think what is really happening is as people will come to me knowing what I do and ask me, have you seen COVID? And I'm thinking, what do you mean? Every day I see COVID. And it's like a fireman who actually every day walks into the fire. So every day you walk in and I walk out, right? It's not like there's no COVID, right? So when I hear there's a death in my local town, I know that I was part of that person that pronounced that person today, and I've made that count today. So when somebody asks me, have I seen COVID? Do I know anybody personally? I sometimes I just think, well, yes, my aunt had it, and my nurse got it, and a good friend got it. But then there are these thousands of hundreds of people that I don't know who they are, that I'm seeing that's passing through my ER, that I test. They're positive. Some get admitted to the ICU. Some of them I have to intubate. Some of them I have to pronounce. So when they ask me, do I see COVID? Yes, I do. Every day that I walk in the ER, and every day it's real. And I am fearful when I walk in there. I am fearful. Am I going to get it this time? Or is my protocols going to be properly? Am I healthy enough? Have I been doing all the right things? Is my inflammation down? Am I eating right? Am I exercising enough? Am I maintaining my stress down? Am I balanced? And then am I doing all my protective things? So yes, it's very stressful, and it's very different. And then for people to say to me, have you seen any COVID? It's just, it's just a different reality, right?
It's interesting. This kind of feeds perfectly into my next question, which is, there's so many sources of information out there, in all aspects of life, but for COVID specifically, I guess for the sake of this conversation, people are getting advice from everywhere, and they think everyone kind of has their favorite place, but nobody. Some people agree, but a lot of these news outlets or health references online don't take the same approaches, and they actually advocate for different things. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, who do you turn to? Like, who do you think is a reliable source of information on what's actually going on and how to be best prepared?
Well, as a physician, I am definitely interested in evidence-based medicine and practice. So everything I do is evidence-based. even though people think it's on the, wooey side or the holistic side or the integrative side. They don't think it's evidence-based, but everything that I do is evidence-based. The problem that we're having now is because, and it's not a problem, and it is a problem, is that we as a nation and we as a world and all scientists are trying to collaborate, and they are putting out the data fast and furious, good and bad. So the scientists are collaborating, whether you like it or not. Scientists are talking to scientists in China, Italy, everywhere. And they're putting out these, they have their own little network, and they're putting out all these messages, and they're saying, hey, I just had this idea, and I just did this study, and I just did this, and blah, 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 blah. And, I'm putting it out there, and some of them will get published without, being screened very well, because there's a lot of some journalists will pick it up and say, hey, this looked good, and they're going to go ahead and run with it. And then the scientists go, wow, I hope nobody published this, because look at this. You did this, and this was wrong, and this was not good, and that wasn't blah, 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 blah. And they say, and they'll say, shoot all the holes you can in all my theories and my thoughts. And then they'll just banter, and they go, well, I hope no journalist picks this one up. So that's where some of the stuff is coming from, because they're just coming fast and furious, and they're not being vetted. So you have to be careful where you're going through it. And I listen to all the dialogues. I listen to the virologists. I look at data. I look at the studies that are coming out. And I think by the time it filters down to the public, some of those things have been, there's got to be, we're a capitalist society. Let's face it. Okay. So if money talks sometimes, and depending on who's writing for who and who's backing who and who has interest in what, I think there is always a little bit of that. But if we just scrape that all away and go to the science first, there's a lot of data coming out. Not all of it's good data. And you have to have a critical eye and critical ear to be able to muddle through all that. And so I think it's very difficult for the lay public at this point.
As you said, you walk into the fire every day. And I just wonder if you're in your position. I mean, I know what we're doing in my household to protect ourselves. And I think that a lot of our family thinks that we're nuts, because we're very much like, I grew up in a family, half my aunts were nurses at the local hospital. So, I mean, I'm very modern medicine is where I come from, but I also found natural medicine and integrative medicine because of my own illness that I healed that way. So we're kind of doing this combo approach in my house. But I wonder, and I think a lot of people would wonder, what do you do? How are you keeping your health robust? How are you protecting yourself as you walk into the war zone every day?
Well, some of my colleagues have actually isolated themselves, and they actually are living in a hotel separate from their family. And I, unfortunately, couldn't do that. I have a room that I could do it in. I thought about it, but I really couldn't separate myself that much from my family. I have a 90-year-old father. I have an 88-year-old mother. I have my twin boys who are 13, and we're still living together. But I wear an N95 majority of the time at work and at home. I pretty much have bashed my face in. I've got these creases chronically on my face. So it's not like looking at myself, because I'm wearing this constantly. When I'm cooking, I'm wearing an N95. So I have a whole procedure. It takes me at least a half an hour to dress, to get in, to go to work. Takes me at least a half an hour to decontaminate myself before I get in. And I basically have told my family our property line is our surgical suite. Nothing from the outside world comes in. We have our dogs, and I spray them down. Spray their paws down. I spray everything down. Anything that comes in the yard, we spray down. We all wear masks around my parents, because they have a little area to themselves. So it's kind of semi-isolated quarantine, so that they have their own area. We only enter it when we wear a mask. And then, at the beginning, I didn't know if that was going to work. So I was petrified. I didn't know if what the choices that I made was going to work. And then I badgered my kids. I would say, Did you take your zinc today? Did you take your vitamin D today? Did you take your andrographis today? Did you take your Immunitex, and did you take your probiotics today? And they're like, yes, Ma, I took it. I'm like, okay. And did you eat green vegetables? Did you eat your green leafy vegetables today? I need to know, how much did you eat? Did you eat like 6 cups today? And they're like, no, we'll get some more. And, so these were the things I would do. I said, did you have sugar today? No sugar. You're off sugar right now. And, they'd be like, come on, we got to have a little something. Can't we have some of that organic candy that you give us that's like just natural fruit? I go, oh, okay. Can I have some dates? I really love the dates. I have to have some dates. Oh, okay. How about some honey? I want some honey in my shakes. I'm like, oh, okay. So at the beginning, I didn't know if this was going to work, but now I'm kind of feeling more relaxed, a little less stress. I mean, knock on wood, so far everything's been working. I'm just hoping that I don't put my guard down and I forget a procedure and I, don't decontaminate something and bring it into the home or do something. I've been a little bit more relaxed because I'm more comfortable around it too. So you have to be aware of that issue. I mean, I had a nurse who was working with me while I was testing somebody, and they don't like to wear the mask. And so at the inappropriate time, he decided, because it gets hot and you need a little fresh air every now and then. So he decided to take his mask off to get some fresh air and put it on. But he didn't think about where he was, what we were doing. And I was testing people, and we're outside in the open in the wind. And he said he remembers a big gust of air come in. He ended up getting COVID. He was quite ill. So I just hope that I don't do something like that, because you're going to, right? And then I hope my immune system is strong enough to combat it when I come in contact to it.
So we've established that infections have an energetic component to them, and oftentimes the electrical systems of our body are the first to be affected by an invading pathogen. Well, it turns out that the ancient Chinese physicians understood this as well, and they discovered some energetic pathways that can be accessed via specific points on our body to boost the effectiveness of our immune system. This can be extremely helpful when it comes to fighting off viruses and bacterial infections. Let's take a look.
The acupuncture and its ability to support immune function pertains to specific points that we use. In stomach 36, just below the knee, on the lateral side, Zhu San Li, it's been studied extensively. It acts kind of like an herb we use, astragalus. Everybody knows astragalus, right? The great adaptogenic, immune-enhancing herb. Well, stomach 36 actually works just like that. And then if you add moxa on top of it, like needle top moxa, to the needle on stomach 36, you kind of potentiate that whole action of supporting the production of good cellular responses, whether it's red blood cells, white blood cells. So moxibustion, we might want to make note is that it's practiced in China and it's also practiced in Japan, and they're practiced very differently. The Chinese style, which is where it all originated, was using a moxa stick, which is kind of rolled like a cigar, and you would just hold it over a point and heat the point, essentially. And there's different techniques. There's sort of holding it continuously, or we call it pecking. And generally, using that method is to do a number of things, like warm the body. Moxa is warming, but it also, when something's warming, if you think about using a heat pad on your back, for example, it opens up the blood vessels and everything starts moving and you feel better. Or we can take the loose moxa, well, it's rolled, but it's chopped up, and we put it on the needle, and then we light the moxa cone, I guess you will, on the needle, and the heat goes down through the needle into the body. And that will also, it's warming, of course, but like on stomach 36, I talked about that point earlier, and its ability to help with immune function and qi. Adding a moxa roll on top of the needle just potentiates the action of that point. And so we can add a moxa cone to any point on the body, and it's going to potentiate the action of the point.
Before we get into modality 2, we have a quick special report from the legendary Dr. Christiane Northrup, who will be guiding us through some specific dietary supplements that we all should be taking right now to keep ourselves healthy in the coming months.
What are things that we can do to to stack the odds in our favor, I guess, so to speak, what are lifestyles that you really do get behind, that you think people should be doing as opposed to relying on, just modern pharmaceuticals?
Well, that's the last thing I would rely on. The last thing. So what I've been doing for the whole time and recommending is vitamin C, and liposomal vitamin C is much more absorbed, and you can take half as much to get the same effect. So 2,000 to 5,000 milligrams a day, and you'd up it if you start to feel sick. Vitamin D3, 10,000 international units per day. Now I happen to know what my blood levels are, and I know that 10,000 is okay for a time. You can do that for months, but it's always good to get your level checked. And then zinc. We think that one of the reasons why the hydroxychloroquine works is that it helps zinc get into the cells where it's needed. So I use the Vimergy brand of liquid zinc because it doesn't taste so metallic and horrible. So, just a couple droppers full. Another thing is Pico Silver, created by Dr. Carolyn Dean. This stuff kills viruses on contact, and you can use it for little kids. It has no taste whatsoever. You cannot overdose at all. So the Pico Silver from Carolyn Dean, I really, really like. And then magnesium. Most people, especially when you're under stress, you need more magnesium. And again, the best one I've found is from Carolyn Dean. It's liquid, Remag and Remite, and then I just have that in a little water with a pinch of Himalayan sea salt. That creates a very hydrating solution. And so that helps enormously. Remember, the body is a battery. And when you are hydrated optimally with enough electrolytes, everything works better. The lungs are erectile tissue. Most people don't realize this. And when you're dehydrated, they don't work as well. So you can do the half your body weight in water per day, but you've got to add some electrolytes to it. Otherwise, it's like peeing on a rock. It just goes through your body, and that's ridiculous. Yeah. So those are the things that I would recommend to anybody in flu season or cold season or whatever, because that's the stuff that works.
How about other things outside of herbs and supplementation? Are there other lifestyle practices that you think are also really great at keeping your immune system robust?
Yes, sleep. Sleep is like that's the number one thing. And I don't know, when you had this thing and I had this thing, I would just have to take a nap in the middle of the day. I would collapse. So sleep and turning off the Wi-Fi when you are sleeping so that you're not bombarded with EMF during that whole time. I also bought Stetzer filters for my whole house so that the dirty electricity is not coming around. I can't even explain it. I'm not that good at it. I just know that I got the number down to less than 50. And probably I will be getting Ethernet to remove the Wi-Fi signal from my house altogether. I'm very concerned about the coming 5G that they have been surreptitiously rolling out around the planet. It's like, just have them look over there while we do this thing over there. So I'm doing what I can, because worrying about that is not going to help me. But doing something with the electricity, always turning off my cell phone, never sleeping with it close to my head. My daughter, they just flip the breakers for the whole upstairs of their house when they sleep. So that's another way to do it. Yeah.
Timers too. So some putting
that's good.
Your router on a timer so that it just every night at 10 it just shuts off and then turns back on at like 10 the next day or something like that is.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a great idea.
When it comes to overall immune health and fighting off illness, herbs, functional mushrooms, and specific supplements are among the most effective things you can add to your lifestyle. So what are some specific natural medicines that we can bring into our pantry to turbocharge our bodies and thrive in the coming months? That's where we're going next.
One of the herbs out of Chinese herbal medicine, which is a star in our medicine, I consider it an emperor herb, is astragalus, Huang Qi. So in Chinese medicine, it builds our qi. It's considered an adaptogen, which we like. It helps the body adapt to stress. Supports our immune response in a Chinese medicine way in that it supports our Wei Qi, which is our protective qi that prevents us from getting sick. And so it strengthens the Wei Qi. In Western science, they have proven that it does increase cellular activity in white blood cells and red blood cells and supports our immune response.
We have a lot of research on astragalus being a good herb to modulate and help the immune response.
So just like many other functional mushrooms, reishi mushroom is amazing for immune support and gut health.
In Chinese medicine, reishi is actually in the category of calming the mind, but also it's recognized as being a wonderful immune boosting, immune supporting herb.
One of the original studies for gut health in the West out of San Francisco studied mice on a high-fat, low-carb diet, and the control group didn't get reishi mushroom, and the other group did. And the mice that got the reishi mushroom lost more weight and had better gut health after the study. So obviously, a lot of studies start with mice, and then you go to humans later, much later. So reishi mushroom is amazing for gut health, amazing for immune support with these beta-glucans.
Natural medicine is helping people cope with stress. Natural medicine is helping people support their immune system. And the more we know about natural medicine and how to use it, the more we will be equipped to face everything that's unfolding faster and faster.
To cap off our modality 2 on herbs, fungi, and supplements for a stronger immune system, we have a special report from Dr. Joe Pizzorno, who joined us all the way from Seattle to take us through some powerful supplements that we should be taking every single day to fortify our system and fend off disease in the coming months.
A lot of people look to you for alternative approaches to staying well, and it would be great to hear what you have been doing to keep yourself well over the last couple months.
Great. So first off, let's talk about language. I hate the term alternative medicine because that implies one or the other. And the best medicine combines the best of both worlds. So I'm a natural medicine doctor. I know how to help promote health, and that helps a lot of people in a lot of conditions, but sometimes you need high-tech intervention. So we need both. When we're looking at this virus, it's so typical of so many other diseases, and that is the people who are dying are primarily those who are elderly and have a comorbidity. Comorbidity means they have another serious disease. So right there, you know, well, if you have a serious disease, you're not going to have that disease, but susceptibility to other diseases as well. So one is, of course, living healthily. Now, when we're looking at something like a virus, the way our body protects ourselves from these viruses is actually very well known. So you can be smart and enhance those mechanisms. So let's talk about a few of those. So first off, so you have our cells, and then the virus tries to get into our cells to then take over the machinery of the cells to reproduce the virus. So what is the key nutrient that the body uses to block the virus from taking over cellular machinery? Turns out zinc. Zinc is one of the most common mineral deficiencies today. I would assert probably about 50% of the population is not consuming enough zinc. So right there, not consuming enough zinc, your innate ability to protect yourself from viruses is going to be impaired. And it's more than that. So not only do you have to have zinc in your diet, but the zinc has to get into your cells. So it turns out that there are certain molecules that are in the diet, actually in a healthy diet, that facilitate zinc being absorbed into the cells. They're called zinc ionophores. And what are those? They're things like bioflavonoids, like quercetin, things like this. Well, when people go on a diet of foods that are low in plant materials and high in chemically grown foods, I'm not saying conventionally grown foods anymore, I'm saying chemically grown foods versus organically grown foods. Those chemically grown foods in the high meat diet don't have near as many of those flavonoids in them, so it's less able to get zinc into the cells. Then we look at other resistance, and the first line of resistance is our mucous membranes. So once you say you inhale a virus, however it happens, comes in contact with the mucous membranes, it then has to get through the mucous membranes. Our mucous membranes have a bunch of protective mechanisms. Well, it turns out if you're vitamin A deficient, you don't make adequate protective mucous membranes, and you're more susceptible to infections. Now, notice I said vitamin A. I didn't say beta carotene. A lot of people conflate beta carotene with vitamin A, but the reality is that 1/4 of people very poorly, if at all, convert beta carotene to vitamin A. So if somebody who is a vegan, for example, and I'm not anti-vegan, I've done it myself at times, but if you're being a vegan, if you have the genetics such that you can't convert beta carotene to vitamin A, you've got to take vitamin A. I did a study in Canada where I measured vitamin A levels in 200 oil field workers in Canada. These are just basically young men, primarily. 40% were deficient in vitamin A. So again, a very, very common nutritional deficiency. Then we have another one called vitamin D, okay? Vitamin D works with vitamin A to make sure the immune system is functioning properly, and in particular, to make sure something called macrophages work in our bodies. We have two immune systems. We have what's called the innate immune system that reacts immediately when we have an infection. Then we have the humoral, or the antibody-based immune system, that takes several days to ramp up. So when your first line of defense is the innate immune system, and that starts with the macrophages. Well, it turns out that if people are deficient in vitamin D, the macrophages don't work very well. And what do the coronavirus attack first? They attack the macrophages. So people with healthy macrophages are much more resistant to the infection, whereas people with poor macrophages, they can't slow the replication of the virus enough. Now they get a much bigger disease.
As we heard earlier in this episode, the majority of individuals who have been hospitalized or worse from the COVID-19 virus had an underlying health issue. Oftentimes, one of the major factors that can weaken our immune system and leave us susceptible to other sickness is a hidden pathogen in our system. Hidden pathogens are infectious microorganisms like viruses, bacteria, mold, fungi, or parasites that live inside our bodies. They skirmish with our immune system here and there and slowly drain our body of vital resources. When enough of these microorganisms exist inside of us, they can severely compromise our internal functions, including our ability to fight off new invasions from an outside virus or bacterial infection. Scary, huh? So how can we heal these infections within us and strengthen our immune defenses in order to stay healthy during this pandemic? That's where we're going next.
So when people have chronic illness and they can't really put their finger on it, oftentimes we have to look for kind of a hidden pathogen in the body, whether it's Lyme, whether it's Epstein-Barr virus, whether it's mycotoxins or mold exposure. These are some hidden infections, and they can be at a cellular level or they can be more at a macro level in the liver and show up in the blood. So it's being a detective and finding out what's at the root, right? You've tried all these other therapies. You're doing everything you can to increase your lifestyle choices for health. You're doing it. You're putting in the good work, and yet you still feel really sick. Or we see higher liver enzymes and low white blood cells over and over and over, and that's not shifting. Well, why? What's causing this light to come up on your dash that's telling you something's wrong, right? And so that's when we go in and say, okay, do we need to look at viruses and all these different viruses, whether it's herpes simplex or cytomegalovirus or Epstein-Barr virus, or is it toxicariid that you got from your dog that you didn't even realize that he gave you a parasite years before and you've just been living with it? Were you working in a water damaged building and your immune system will not bounce back and you've just been sick, or your hormones have been really all over the map, and then they put a cell tower on top of your building and you're just feeling worse and worse and worse. It's understanding all of these toxic exposures, whether it's a biotoxin or an infection, and it's compounded by some environmental toxicity. So it's looking at it all together. That's when you want to see a doctor that's going to be a detective and figure it out, find out what's hiding in here, what's under biofilm that we're not picking up on regular lab testing.
Why is a pathogen hidden? This is a good question, and it's actually kind of cool because the pathogens are intelligent. They're hidden because they're protecting themselves. The way that they protect themselves often, I'll use bacteria as a great example, like for example Lyme disease, is that they build a protection layer around themselves called a biofilm. And that biofilm protects them from our immune system going in and destroying the bacteria. And they can just live and survive in this biofilm, this like little, shelter for an extended period of time. You can take antibiotics for 2 years to try to kill Lyme disease. Symptoms go away, you stop taking the antibiotics, and it comes back. So the bacteria can just hide out and wait. And the really crazy thing is, if you start looking at the actual biofilms themselves, they start taking things from the environment to create this shield. And so you'll see pieces of toxins like metals in our body as a shield around these bacteria. So they used to think like Candida and things fed off of heavy metals, but they don't really feed off of them. They actually use the heavy metals to build a protective layer around themselves so that they can survive our immune attack or medicinals or pharmaceuticals that are trying to kill them. And so a big part of getting rid of these kind of pathogens is you have to destroy the biofilm.
One really under-recognized root cause for a lot of mysterious or chronic illnesses is what we call hidden infections, meaning occult infections that we're not even aware of, because within our skin or on our skin and in our digestive systems, in our mouths, in our nasal passages, we have all types of, critters hanging out. They take up residence. And so sometimes if you're what we call your microbiome, like the community of these bacteria or funguses and stuff get thrown off, then more pathogenic ones, like the really bad ones, could then take over and create symptoms.
Virus can go anywhere. Virus gets into our bloodstream and our lymphatics, and it can go anywhere in the body, and it can kind of hide out. In Chinese medicine, we recognize that there are pathogenic factors which are stuck in the body, and we need to release them. So it's kind of interesting to see that correlation between the old theory and our newer understanding of, oh, this is really interesting. At any one time, any of us can have about 10 viruses. We don't necessarily know, because our body compensates for that, which is really cool. But these viral loads can create a long-term chronic irritation to the body. So that's what leads to some of that pain and dysfunction.
When the immune system is down, because the energy is not there to protect the body. Or think about a home that doesn't have any power supply. So if your power supply is low, you are a perfect host for an infection. And the infections that come and break in that you can't fight off are the ones that are hiding from the immune system inside the cell, those intracellular infections. And so a lot of people with chronic fatigue have these hidden infections because, doctors haven't looked for them. But if you go looking, you'll find them.
A very common one, especially out here in the Bay Area, Northern California, is Lyme.
One of the biggest problems in Lyme disease is that we are using the Lyme rate studies. We're using the CDC criteria for submission into Lyme rate studies for diagnostics. So with Lyme disease, it is only diagnosed by one thing. It's a clinical intake diagnosis, Lyme disease. We somehow have gotten hung up that there needs to be 5 out of 10 active bands. That is not true for a diagnosis, but every doctor will tell you and repeat that. And that is part of one of the biggest confusions. So you can have no active bands on a Lyme test. You can have 1 active band. We don't even have the testing to really pick up the hundreds of different types of tick-borne infections that are not only specific to regions, they're specific to countries. So there's only one continent that doesn't have Lyme disease, and every continent. It's just how aggressive is it? So, there are 14 states in the United States that are endemic, which means they're at an epidemic level. The number one way to prevent Lyme disease by 59% is to take a shower immediately. And so the part about that is we need to be preventative. Testing is not accurate enough at this point, but private labs, not only for infectious disease, but for nutrient deficiencies, issues with gut and bowel health, there are a lot of very accurate tests that can be tools to help you on your healing journey. And patients need to be informed, they need to use them, and they need to really push their insurance companies to pay for them.
In conventional medicine, they just look at people who are severely immunocompromised. They're like, oh, their immune system's so compromised, so then it becomes like this fatal thing for them and life-threatening. But I found that there's a lot of patients who have chronic mysterious symptoms. They have more like a subclinical yeast infection or mold or fungal infection. There could be infection in the large intestine. You can identify that through stool testing. There can be infection in the small intestine, what we call small intestinal fungal overgrowth, or SIFO. And again, with patients who suffer from a lot of chronic neurological symptoms, there could be infestation in the nasal passages. And so I've worked with patients who've been to other practitioners who understand how to treat mold, but they might do a mold protocol for what's going on in the digestive system. But if they don't address what's happening in the nasal cavity, they might miss a major source of infection that's impacting a person's brain health. And a lot of time, mold really does impact, I've seen two major systems of the body. Number one, the immune system. So if you're struggling with like an autoimmune condition, or you just maybe not like a serious illness, but you just get sick all the time, and no matter what you do, you're not able to, get over it or fight that, and you're chronically getting sick, it could be mold. The second system that mold can really impact is the nervous system. And so if you're struggling with chronic neurological symptoms like brain fog or irritability, or you're just not feeling, you're feeling stressed all the time, you don't really have a reason why, it's just like you just kind of feel on edge all the time, that could be a sign that you have mold toxicity. If you're eating foods that feed mold, such as sugar, and you find that your symptoms either get worse, you might actually feel much better and be like on this high for a while, but then you crash and your symptoms get worse over time by eating things such as sugar, or even sometimes for what we consider healthy foods like fermented foods or kombucha. Sometimes there's a reaction with the bacteria in those fermented foods with the yeast or the candida or the fungus. So if you have symptoms eating those types of food that typically feed mold or yeast, then that could be another indicator that you should get it checked out, right? And the best ways to get it checked out is just there's blood tests out there that can test for sensitivities to mold. You can test IgE responses or allergic responses to mold. You can even run more advanced blood tests that look at what's known as your innate immune system's response to mold. And in addition, one of the tests I run a lot with my patients is urinary mycotoxin test, because that's one of the easiest, it's least invasive, and that measures levels of mold toxins, because it's not so much just the environment you find yourself in, it's what it's actually doing to you and your body that's most important. There's some cutting edge treatments out there that I think really warrant more attention, is what we call controlled hyperthermia, where you actually, in a controlled fashion, you induce a fever in the person. And what that does, it activates your innate immune system's ability to get rid of that. And I've seen miracles happen. I've seen, a patient with a chronic Lyme condition, and they did a few treatments of this controlled hyperthermia, and bam, you just started to see the veil lift. And it was over the course of like a week. So the great thing is there's these breakthroughs in technologies and ways of addressing them that are safe and actually harness the power of your body's ability to get rid of those pathogens.
The important thing to realize is that antibiotics have really changed the face of medicine. Before antibiotics were around, babies died all the time, right? Mothers died during childbirth. We had nothing else. We would bleed people, and that was it. So antibiotics came around, and suddenly it was a miracle. We had something we could use. Started with penicillin, and then just kept expanding and expanding. But I think because medicine went from a place of engaging in practices like bloodletting that did more harm than good, when antibiotics became available, doctors didn't want to let go of it.
So the idea was we should use antibiotics to treat anything and everything. And that became a problem. Here's the problem is something like half of all antibiotics that are prescribed in the United States are given to babies with ear infections or respiratory infections that are mostly caused by viruses.
The American Association of Pediatrics back in the early 2000s basically came out and said when a child has an ear infection, we should assess them for dairy. All pediatricians should have been doing that at the very beginning of 2000. Yet most people that go in for their child has an ear infection, they're given antibiotics, and they may or may not ever be asked to look at dairy as a culprit of why they have ear infections. The American Association of Pediatrics also said you don't need to treat every child for an ear infection with antibiotics back in the early 2000s. And yet, how many children are still treated with antibiotics today when they go in with an ear infection? So sometimes the research isn't making it, or sometimes these pieces aren't making it into clinical practice. So it's up to the doctor to stay up to date on what's coming out.
And I've been in that scenario as a family practice doc. Mom comes in with a 6-month-old baby, and the baby's crying, has a fever, pulling at their ear. You look at the eardrum, it's red, and the mom's saying, doctor, do something, do something. So it's so tempting to write that prescription for amoxicillin. And the reason I stopped doing that is, A, there was research showing that if you just treated the baby symptomatically, maybe gave them some gentle remedies like mullein oil straight in the eardrum. That warm oil by itself is soothing. The baby feels better, etc. But, there were studies done in the Netherlands and other countries that showed that if you didn't treat the baby, they got better in the same period of time. So the illusion is it looks like they're getting better. The patient feels like the doctor's done something. The doctor feels like they've done something. And there weren't any consequences, but now we know there are consequences. And we know that from studying the microbiome. I go back to work by Dr. Blaser, who has shown your microbiome never completely recovers from antibiotics.
Antibiotics not only are not addressing the root cause, but they're actually creating more problems. One of the root causes behind skin issues, and especially acne, has to do with the microbiome and the beneficial bacteria that are in the gut that help support our health. But when we take oral antibiotics, it kills not only the bad bacteria, but also the good bacteria. And this is part of the reasons why we're seeing certain health issues, gut issues, super infections, all kinds of issues have developed as a result of the overuse of antibiotics. And also topical use of antibiotics can also disrupt the skin microbiome. So the skin has its own balance of microorganisms that live on and protect it. And the gut-skin connection is really important. So what we put internally as well as what we put externally impacts the skin microbiome.
The antibiotics don't solve much except take a little bit of the load off your immune system to let your immune system replenish itself so it can stand itself. But many infections are persistent and they get into the tissue themselves and they kind of sit in the nerve and they can't be cleared with antibiotics. Antibiotics are becoming less and less effective as well, and there are more infections that are becoming resistant to antibiotic therapy.
A certain percentage of people will develop antibiotic-associated diarrhea. And that antibiotic-associated diarrhea can be life-threatening, especially if it's caused by a bacteria called Clostridium difficile. Then you have to treat with more powerful antibiotics to kill the Clostridium difficile. So that's an acute scenario, is that you can actually cause a bigger problem than you solve. That's one issue. But what about the long-term implications? Well, what we're finding is that when you disrupt the microbiome, especially early on in life, you've got long-term consequences. That can lead to autoimmune disease. Some of the most compelling research that I've seen is on ulcerative colitis. And we've got an epidemic of ulcerative colitis in kids now. Really on the rise, it's increasing. They're very compelling studies showing that if you map the number of courses of antibiotics that a kid has with the incidence of ulcerative colitis, they track completely together. Well, that makes sense. What is ulcerative colitis? It's a type of inflammatory bowel disease where the immune system that's lining the gut starts making mistakes. And it starts going after healthy bacteria. It starts making antibodies against healthy bacteria and healthy fungi, and that causes inflammation that ulcerates the lining of the gut. But then a parent may say, well, I don't give my kid antibiotics. Are you feeding your kid food that's not organically raised? Chickens in particular? You know what they put in the chicken feed? Antibiotics. They put it in the pig feed. Why do they put antibiotics into animal feed? Because it increases their growth. You know, they're growing up in these conditions that are at best unsanitary, right? So what do you do about that? If you give them antibiotics, it can keep the pig from getting sick, right? But it also makes them grow faster. And yet, what are the consequences of that? Those pigs get antibiotic-resistant bacteria in their gut, and then, you know, when they get slaughtered and turned into bacon, you know, those bacteria can persist in the meat. So now you have these antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are spreading everywhere. This is solid science that I'm talking about. So the antibiotic issue is much bigger than just getting overprescribed by doctors. That's what I'm saying. Something like half of all the antibiotics produced in this country go into animal feed. We're talking tons of antibiotics that go in animal feed. Unlike in Europe where they've banned these practices. Why don't we do that in this country? Because there's big money in selling these antibiotics. Huge money behind it. So we've got economic forces that are trumping science forces.
Okay, our last segment tonight is a quick piece of wisdom from Dr. Anita Wong, who you met earlier in this episode. The words you're about to hear really shed some perspective on what we as a civilization can expect the next 2 years to look like. Listen for a new term called respiratory etiquette that can make a huge difference in overcoming the current pandemic and thriving into the future.
What do you think we can expect in the next 4, 8, 12, 16 months? Do you think some people are coming out, you know, going to Daytona Beach and partying and all that stuff that you see, you know, on the news? Do you think that we're potentially getting closer to being in the clear, or is this something that you could see very easily just coming right back and being just another big problem?
Well, pandemics historically comes in waves, right? So we had our first wave, and they typically have 3 waves. So we haven't had our second wave yet. So, and after we have our second wave, we're gonna have our third wave. So it's not over. And we then are also gonna have the flu virus, right? So this is not over. And the thing that, for me, the silver lining out of this whole thing, I hope, which helps, is one is that we, as a universe, that we become a solidarity with everyone around globally, and communicate and share information and act as one. I think there's a lot of different sources that are trying to do that. And the other thing is that life expectancy has increased, not because of modern medicine. Modern medicine has increased and extended our lives by 3 years. What has extended our lives from the age of 40 to now we're almost 80 in the United States is public health. And public health has been poo-pooed and banned down and put down, but public health is what's extended our lives. Paving the streets after the pandemic, sewers, clean water, all of these things have extended our lives, right? So it's not modern medicine. Those are the things. And the thing that has been my bugaboo, because every year it happens, is respiratory etiquette. Respiratory etiquette, and to me it was surprising. We have to have bulldozer announcements to tell people, wash your hands, sneeze in your throat, wash your hands after you sneeze, don't breathe on somebody, don't sneeze on somebody, cough, all of these things. This is proper etiquette, right? During the flu season, and stay home if you're sick, right? And we don't incentivize people to stay home when they're sick. We incentivize them to come to work, right? The surveys, the data shows that during this pandemic, 35% of the people who were sick went to work. Now, when it's not a pandemic, 90% of the people, when they're sick, they go to work. That's got to change, because when you go, you're sharing your virus, and people, our society is like, oh, you're macho, you did it, you come in, you worked through it, you trudged through it, we're the wild, wild west, we got to do that, right? But no, I think that we got to change that mentality, because no, if I go in, that person has a child at home with cancer, and they can't take this home, and that person has a mother that's 90, and that person has some autoimmune or a comorbidity or something, and they can't get this. I need to protect them. So I need to be able to work remotely. I think that we have shown that we can do these things. We can do all of these things, and we can still continue on, right? So it's not that we need to be closed, but we need to have proper respiratory etiquettes, because every year I'm in the ER treating thousands, hundreds of cases of flu, and we're inundated, and people are lined up in the hallway, and sometimes we have to put up the tent that we have now to do COVID, to take care of all the flu people, and we don't bat an eye at 60,000 people dying of the flu every year. We let them die. We're okay with it, because it doesn't affect us. It's just going to affect the weak, the young and the weak and the old, right? Well, this is the new one that's going to do that, right? And we're going to be okay with it, because our medical society is just going to be able to handle it and take care of that. And it's okay. We're just going to let those people die, because it's okay. We're just going to keep on going, right? It's like seatbelts. So why are we worried about wearing a seatbelt? And you didn't get an accident every day, but you wear one every day, right? So if you have a cold, if you have a runny nose, you're not feeling that well, and you're going to go out, you're going to put a mask on. Wear a mask, and then people will know, oh, thank you. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. You're wearing a mask. Or if somebody's wearing a mask and they say, oh, you have cancer. Oh, let me just stay away. I'm sorry. Let me be protective of you, right? I think we need to have a different respiratory etiquette, and that's public health. And that's where we're going to save lives, because we're going to have new protocols on public health, and people are going to be more courteous, and they're not going to infect others, right? And I hope that that's the silver lining that I see, because I hope the flu season is not going to be bad. I don't know. And that's what I worry about. If we have the next wave coincide with the influenza, we're going to have a problem, right? And I still don't even have good testing that I can tell whether or not you have this or that at my facility. It's hard to get a rapid test for these things. So that, that's my take on it.
Wow, that was a jam-packed episode. So, what have we learned? First off, at any one time, many people have roughly 10 viruses living inside of them. We don't necessarily notice these because our body compensates to keep us going. Over time, we get run down, and these viral loads often create a long-term chronic irritation inside the body. According to current theories, most diseases are caused by chronic inflammation. PEMF, or pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, is able to augment the body's capacity to fight the infection. It increases macrophage activity, which are the natural scavengers in our bodies that fight bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and get rid of heavy metals and other toxins. Research shows PEMF also increases ATP, or your body's natural energy currency, by 600% to boot, so you'll be healing infections and boosting energy levels. Dr. Frank Littman then told us that sugar dysregulation is a downstream mechanism which leads to heart disease, prediabetes, diabetes, obesity, and all manner of inflammatory problems. It also leads to the comorbidities often seen in those who are severely impacted by COVID-19. Get this, 1 in 8 people in America are metabolically healthy. That means that 7 out of 8 people are metabolically unhealthy. At the very least, sugar dysregulation and poor metabolic health makes us more susceptible to disease and is an indicator of bad long-term health outcomes. The good news is that if you change your diet, start sleeping properly, move your body, and deal with the stress, you can reverse a lot of these metabolic changes. Dr. Dan Balin then shared the science of regulation thermography, which was developed in Europe based on ancient principles. By taking the surface temperature of specific areas of the body, we can detect abnormalities in our organs. We are able to measure the information that our organs send through the autonomic nerves to our skin and capillary beds. We then tuned into our second special report with Dr. Anita Wong, an ER physician who works with COVID patients every day. To keep herself healthy, Dr. Wong uses a combo approach: zinc, vitamin D, Andrographis, probiotics, green vegetables, 6 cups daily, and no sugar. Next, we move to modality number 3, traditional Chinese medicine. It turns out that acupuncture holds many keys to improving immune function naturally. One approach is using the famous point, stomach 36, translated as leg 3 mile, which has been scientifically validated to augment white blood cells and enhance immunity. Whether using a needle or a moxa stick, this immune-enhancing point is used daily in Asia to promote longevity. Next, we spoke with Dr. Christiane Northrup, who gave us the goods on how to use vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin D3, pico silver, and Himalayan sea salt to boost our body's defenses. She also encouraged us to get more than enough sleep each night, keeping EMF-emitting devices like cell phones, tablets, and computers far away from our bed. In modality number 2, we learned that astragalus, or Wang Qi, is highly renowned as an immunomodulator. Reishi mushroom, or Ganoderma lucidum, is also recognized as being a wonderful immune-boosting herb, even though mushrooms, technically, fall into their own category of organism. This gut health promoting prebiotic and probiotic fungus is packed with beta-glucans, which are well researched for immune enhancement. What is the key nutrient that the body uses to block viruses from taking over our cellular machinery? That would be zinc, and it's one of the most common new mineral deficiencies today. If you're low on zinc, your innate ability to protect yourself from viruses is going to be impaired. It also turns out that if you're vitamin A deficient, you don't make adequate protective mucous membranes and are more susceptible to infections. Also, when people are low in vitamin D, their macrophages don't work very well, and people with healthy macrophages are much more resistant to infections. So, make sure to get your vitamins in. In modality number 1, we explored one of the most under-recognized root causes of chronic illness: hidden pathogens. Why is a pathogen hidden? Remember, pathogens, or non-beneficial microbes, are intelligent, and they're hidden because they're protecting themselves. They build a protection layer called a biofilm, and that biofilm protects them from our immune system. They can just live and survive in this biofilm, shelter in place, so to speak, for an extended period of time. We then talked about Lyme disease and the fact that we don't have adequate testing to pick up the hundreds of different types of tick-borne infections that are out there. The number one way to prevent Lyme disease by 59% is to take a shower immediately after being outside. Therefore, the best approach here is being preventative. If you're struggling with chronic neurological symptoms like brain fog, irritability, feeling stressed all the time and don't have a reason why, or you constantly just feel on edge, it could be mold toxicity. Some trusted mold toxicity tests include IgE responses or more advanced blood tests of the innate immune system, such as urinary mycotoxin tests. Next, we uncovered some of the unspoken facts about antibiotics and their negative impact on our immune health. In the early 2000s, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out and advised doctors to first test children with ear infections for dairy sensitivities before ever treating them with antibiotics. And yet, how many children are still treated with antibiotics today when they go in with an ear infection? Sometimes even overwhelming proof doesn't mandate a protocol to be used in clinical practice. Research by Dr. Martin Blaser shows that your microbiome never completely recovers from antibiotics. Not only do they miss the root cause of many infections, but they're actually creating more problems. It's also important to remember that antibiotics are used in conventional feed for chickens, pigs, cows, and turkeys. So if you eat inorganic meat, you are ingesting a bunch of these antibiotics with it. Lastly, Dr. Wong told us that we need to have proper respiratory etiquette moving forward through this pandemic. In the very near future, we're going to have new protocols in public health as well as better testing. Hopefully, this will become another one of the coronaviruses that we humans have already adapted to live with, but only time will tell. Okay, 2 more things before we go. 1, make sure to click the button below this video to find out how you can bring all 10 episodes of our Proven docuseries, plus a bunch of powerful bonus resources into your home for life. Every one of us deserves to know the full spectrum of healing options that are out there for us, and the information in this series is something you'll want to come back to again and again whenever an illness arises in your circle, be it your own health or that of your family and friends. You can own the digital, the physical, or the all-access package at a special discounted price, but it all goes away once this bonus episode 10 comes down. Now is the time. Lastly, I just wanted to say thanks again for tuning in to the Proven docuseries. As you can probably see, we're extremely passionate about getting this vital healing information out into the world, so much so that we just had to give you one final bonus, episode 10. We couldn't help ourselves. Now that the premiere is officially coming to a close, the team and I will be embarking on a new adventure, creating our next project that will be released next year. I want you to know that your enthusiasm, your support, is what fuels these endeavors, and we wouldn't be able to do it without you. Thank you so much for standing with us and helping us spread these empowering methods of taking back your health. We're all in this thing together. Until next time.